Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Fun English with Alex, episode number 18. Yay! Hey guys, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I know we do have a lot of new students starting February 1st of this year. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do hit the subscribe button below. That way you get all the videos as soon as they come out. In today's video, we're going to talk about two really important questions. The first question, have you? And the second question, have you ever? Now, I know a lot of people out there thinking, yo, Alex, isn't that the same thing? No, it isn't. And yes, it is. If you are an in-class student, this should be some pretty good review for you. If you are a new student, I promise I will explain this very clearly. So get your pencils and paper ready, and we're going to get started with our lesson. All right, let's get started with today's video. So before we go any further, first we have to take a look at those two questions. Have you and have you ever? Now, basically, both of these questions are asking you about past experience. But one of these questions, when you ask, you expect the person to say yes. For example, have you eaten a hamburger before? I think there is a large amount of people in the world who will say yes. I love hamburgers. Or maybe, have you drunk a beer before? If you are of age, 18 years old, in some places like America, I think you have to be 21. But the point is, if I asked you, have you drunk beer before? There's a high possibility, there's a high chance that you're going to say yes. However, if I asked you, have you ever? I think to myself that you, the listener, are probably going to say no. For example, have you ever drunk pizza beer? Pizza beer. I said that right. There's a high chance that most of you out there have never, ever drunk pizza beer. So if I asked you, have you ever drunk pizza beer? You're probably going to say no. Or maybe if I asked, have you ever eaten moose burger or moose meat? Have you ever eaten moose meat? I think most people will say no. But again, it depends on where you live. But I think most people might say no. Or if I ask, have you ever seen a ghost? I hope most people say no. But do you see the difference? If I ask, have you drunk water today? There's a high chance that you're going to say yes. Have you ever drunk pizza beer? There's a high chance that you're going to say no. So basically, these questions are very similar. They're asking you about past experiences. The difference is, if somebody asked you, have you? There's a really good chance you are going to say yes. If someone asked you, have you ever? There's a pretty good chance you're going to say no. So basically, that's the only difference between the two. They're both asking you about past experiences, but have you ever? The listener thinks that you probably are going to say no, and you have never experienced that before. Now, the next really, really, really important part of this is the verb tense that you use. Now, this is the part where a lot of people start to fade away and go, Alex, I don't like learning verb tenses, and I understand. And if you're not familiar with the verb tense, basically, that's when you have eat, ate, and eaten. Those are the three different verb tenses. And that first one, eat, we call it an infinitive. Stay with me. I know this is a little bit hard, but I promise I'll try to explain. So the first verb tense is infinitive, and we call it eat. The second one is simple past, and that would be ate. And then you have past participle, eaten. Now, the great thing about this question, have you or have you ever, you always, 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 always have to use the third one here, the past participle. Now, let's take a look at some examples so I can help you understand a little bit better. So for example, an infinitive, if you look at the infinitive here, you have be, break, bring, build, buy. So these are what you would use for something that might happen in the future. I will be there at 5. And in the simple past, you have was, were, broke, brought, built, bought. Now the one for us that we're going to use if you ask the question, have you or have you ever, is this third column here, past participles. Been, broke, brought, built, bought. Now I know this might take a little bit of time to remember, so you will have to practice a lot before you're able to remember all of this. But the simplest thing for me to tell you is when you ask the question, have you or have you ever, you always have to use this third column, the past participles. I understand it will take time to remember this. So if I were you, I would just write down all the past participles I can think of and just ask questions. Have you ever, and use that third row. It really will make things easier for you. But of course, I have to give you some examples to make things a little bit clearer for you. Now, in these examples, most of these things are from Canada. Actually, I think all of these things are from Canada. So it might be a little bit unusual to some people who are viewing these videos from different parts of the world. But if you're right here in Canada, it might be very normal for you. For example, this first one here, have you ever played hockey before? Have you ever played hockey before? Now, if you live in Hawaii or Brazil or a very warm, the Philippines or Mexico City, a very warm climate, maybe you have never played hockey before. Because, I don't know, are there any hockey rings in your city? In the comments below, if you have hockey arenas where you live, please let me know in the comments below. But when I was growing up in Hawaii and other places like that, we didn't have hockey rinks, so I never went. So you can ask someone, have you ever played hockey? How about the next question here? Have you ever drunk ice wine? Have you ever drunk ice wine? For me, I don't really like alcohol that much. Particularly, I had never heard of ice wine before. I mean, I know wine that is chilled, which means cold, and room temperature red wine, but I never knew you stick wine, even red wine, in ice and freeze it. When I came to Canada, that's when I heard about ice wine. I was very surprised. And because I was surprised, you can ask the question, have you ever? So have you ever drunk ice wine? Now remember, you have drink, D-R-I-N-K, drank, D-R-A-N-K, and then we have the past participle, drunk, D-R-U-N-K. Have you ever drunk ice wine? See, it's getting easier. All right, let's try another one. Have you ever seen a Canadian Mountie? Have you ever seen a Canadian Mountie? Before I came to Canada, I had never seen a Canadian Mountie. So again, we have see, saw, seen. Before I came to Canada, I have never seen a Canadian Mountie. So have you ever seen a Canadian Mountie? So you understand here, because these are a little bit unusual, you want to use the question, have you ever? Okay guys, I hope you understand. There's 3 important points that you do have to remember when asking these questions. First of all, have you, if you ask that question, you expect the person to probably say yes. If you ask the question, have you ever, it's something a little bit unusual, and you think the person who's answering the question is probably going to say no. And that third important point, you have to use the past participles when asking a question. So you have to change it to eaten or drunk or seen or been. You need to use that third column when asking these questions. Okay guys, I hope you learned a lot. Until I see you next time, aloha.